Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Yves Grant. I'm a technical writer. I've been a technical writer for over 20 years now.
And then take us back to of how you landed that first job in technical writing. For everyone, it's different. Some people come in through referrals. Some people don't even know that they're working as a technical writer until someone says, "Hey, that looks like technical writing." So tell us about your journey.
I think it's a great opportunity that happened for me. I mean, it's a great merging of my two loves. I mean, like I was always interested in writing, just since I was young. Loved just writing stories, fiction, science fiction, and so on. I also loved computers. My first computer was Commodore 64. I used to use it for dialing into bulletin board services and playing games that my friends had, and just hobbyist games and stuff like that. I did little programming, but not a lot. So I got my first job in support. And fast forward many years in the technical area in computer support, where I was basically just answering questions for a .com, kind of trying to get people excited about using a website for kind of reverse bidding for supplier parts. So basically, it was like a it was for manufacturers. Um, so they took a chance on me when they grew and decided they needed a writer. So I got an opportunity to become a technical writer. So I joined the engineering team and wrote an API guide, which is application programming interface guide. Learned about that. Basically, just an integration guide between how another company might integrate with the .com. And that's kind of how I got started. I basically just they took a chance on me, knew I was interested in helping customers in more than just telephone support, but basically just writing documentation.
And I'm curious, before we hop to the next question, just defining a little bit more what you said, why do you think they took a chance on you? Because I know it's not all about luck. Sometimes it's they identify maybe a couple skills. So I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, I think I had expressed that I had wanted to do some writing. There was a product manager who helped me get into the role. They didn't have any tech writers. It was basically just the .com days. Everybody was chipping in for the UX writing, the user interface writing for the website. And I don't even know that they thought they needed a writer for the API guides. But basically, at the time, they were looking at growing in and becoming public. So I think they identified a need, and they didn't even put that role out for interviews, or similar to what you said about not maybe even not identifying that they needed a writer, but they saw that I was doing a lot of technical work and support. I was already answering questions and writing things, and I had expressed that interest. So, that how can I write? How can I, do more and be a part of the engineering team? So it was kind of like just a really great opportunity. I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, it was really interesting to know. It feels like you were able to show some tangible examples to help them make that decision. And talk a little bit about your career journey now of things that you did to ensure that you had successful growth within your career. So it didn't just stagnate and maybe you decided to go into a different career altogether, but instead you were able to grow as a technical writer.
Areas that I focused on was I was always embedded in engineering. So while I hadn't gotten a computer science degree or programming language education, I was always embedded in the engineering team, writing for engineers. Things that I focused on is just understanding the product as well. Um, some other places where I've worked where I basically did end user documentation. So people who were purchasing the software and using the software. One of the VPs of engineering that I worked with for a long time, he said, use the product, and that's the best way to understand it and describe it. He also liked that the guides had a lot of screenshots because that's helped orient the user. So understanding the product, always being curious and learning, always curious about finding out a little bit more about why a specific feature worked in a certain way, or even how it was programmed, and speak their language. Like since I've in my career focused on API documentation and writing for other developers that are creating integrations with the companies that I work with, I embed myself in the teams. These days, a lot of engineers work in Agile and Scrum teams, so I embed myself in the Scrum teams, going to their stand-ups, and at some points I was even participating in the stories. So a Scrum team would have a story, and you would part of that story would be documenting it.
I wish technical writers, for those who don't work as close as you do with software engineers, know how cool it is to be in that process and to actually be part of that development cycle. It's a whole nother beast of its own, and it's so interesting because it brings you so much closer with what's going on in the company and the vision.
Absolutely. I was lucky in that one of my companies, they sent everyone to Scrum training. So I got to learn from one of the guys who created the Scrum, and their philosophy was that it's anyone who works should work in the Agile way. Which one guy was even saying that he worked in that way at NPR, and they had like 24-hour scrums where basically they would work on something and have it produced within 24 hours. So in general, scrums are 1 to 2 weeks. So basically, I took program classes, learned development environments, Mac, and then GitHub, and then basically being very cross-functional. So when you're writing, you generally want to get a lot of feedback from everybody. So I would encourage feedback. Some people would give it, some wouldn't. So when they would give feedback, like I would, engineering, product management support, or QA, DevOps, I would really reward that by just sharing with them how valuable their experience is, and even showing them that their feedback impacted the documentation.
Super cool. And I know you had just mentioned a couple skills while you're talking, but if you can go ahead and make tangible maybe a few more skills that you think are really important that helped you succeed, and maybe technical writers should also adopt, whether you've used them or not.
Yes. So I just want to build on that last one about feedback. How to take feedback in writing is useful, because sometimes when you're starting out, at least when I was starting out, it can be really personal. You write something and you think that's yours, and you don't necessarily, maybe if somebody says something like, that doesn't make any sense, or I don't know what you're talking about here, you might take it personally. And I would say just focus all of that feedback and criticism on the work, rather than personal, because ultimately you want people to read what you're writing, and it's not something personal. It's not like your own story or anything. It's really the company's product that you're working on, and it's better to have a mindset that whoever's coming to you with feedback, criticism, they're trying to make things better too. So ultimately, maybe the word choices that you've fallen in love with aren't the best because no one can really understand them. So that's one of the biggest skills, I would say, is like when somebody comes to me, I don't really take the criticism personally. And these days, there's not a lot of people who present it in a personal way anyway. They do focus it on the work. In other words, just looking at a sentence or paragraph or something and just saying, "Well, yeah, I don't quite understand that." And also sometimes, like when I was working at one company, a lot of the engineers would rewrite stuff. So that's just how they would give their feedback, as opposed to saying this doesn't make sense. So that's one of the other good skills I learned is as a writer, you're responsible for creating and designing and producing and publishing the work, but not necessarily, you don't have to write everything. I mean, there's a lot of people who in the company who may have already written some things, and maybe you just have to become an editor. So I learned that early on as well, because there was engineers and designers who created like a better intro than I could come up with. And when I approached my boss about this, saying, well, am I supposed to just stick this in, or I mean, then what am I for, but he said that's, yeah, I mean, that it would basically make a better product. So I think that's, you don't have to write everything. The feedback is useful. You're just basically trying to make a better product. It's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, very true. And in this collaborative effort, oftentimes you're using lots of different tools. And from many of the technical writers we talk to, your experience from, you can tell me if this is right, is mostly in software and really having a passion for understanding the development cycle and being able to work next to software engineers and make things happen. So I'd imagine that the tools may look a little bit different for you than they would for maybe some technical writers viewing this video who may not get completely into the software world. But for them to also understand this is really important to get a full picture of the opportunities out there of what they could do as a technical writer. So if you can talk to us about the tools that you use that you really like, that would be great.
Sure. And these are a little bit maybe less traditional than most writers might see, because right now I'm working for a company that uses Madcap Flare, for example, and there's tools like that. There's Author It, which is similar. It's a self-contained suite of tools that is designed for technical writers, and those are great because there's a lot of features in there that help writers to reuse content and output content in many different formats. But what I like actually is closer to the developer tools. So more modern developer portals that I write for use things like Markdown, GitHub. So I use this text editor called Sublime, which I really like. It's basically, you can use it for coding as well, but there's a Markdown plugin that you can use. There's also, many companies have Atlassian products like Confluence, Jira, Bitbucket, which I like. Google also has products like Docs and Keep that I use for writing, and just about any text editor. So what I've found in my career is that I want to be able to open a program as quickly as possible to start writing. And I used to pen and paper a lot, but I don't do that as much anymore, especially now with a lot of meetings and so on being on Zoom and other tools like that. So I usually use Sublime, which is basically a simple text editor. You can open up a new page and then I just start writing. Other companies may have their own homegrown tools. Like I know that there's some XML editors as well. And then there's the older style like Dida. I haven't had much experience with those, but generally what you want to be able to do is just write the text, and then you can put it in any format you want. But I find that being able to open up a text editor really quick, and basically the way I consume information is I just write everything down almost like a running transcript. It helps me focus on what people are saying, and then I can use that as raw information for whatever output is needed.
Very interesting. And this next question may seem like a bit of a personal question, but one of the things that I've come to know about people who stay in a career for a length of time is that it's not because they're crazy, it's because it makes them happy. So can you tell us a little bit about what goes into finding a technical writing job that you'll enjoy?
Yes. Again, I think as people mature as tech writers, they'll find that they enjoy certain aspects of it. Like one of my friends, he really loves just UX writing, and that's basically where you're writing the material that's on the page of a website. For me, I really like API documentation and developer documentation. So basically, I'm writing for an audience of developers. So when I pick a job, you should focus on what you like. What is it that you want to do? So I focus on access and to support and support from engineers. So ideally, a job that I enjoy would have me embedded in one or several engineering teams. I look for a great culture of support and help and just openness. I think that I've been lucky in that I've worked for places where whenever I've been in the teams, everyone's very open and happy to have a writer involved and happy to explain what they're working on and how it will help customers. Also, investment in documentation is a necessary resource. I find that I like companies that see the value in documentation and not only give the time to writers to write great documentation, but also hire enough writers to support the needs of the documentation required by the company. And then also I look for a company that like kind of hand in hand with the investment, just invest in modern technology for the documentation. So, if I like writing for companies who are creating RESTful APIs, open APIs, and have support for auto-generated documentation so that when I do the writing, I can focus on use cases and so on. And also, if there's auto-generated documentation, I can just edit those files as opposed to creating sort of a replica of the kind of API reference material, which is a little bit less, I guess, creative.
One of the things I find really interesting about what you do is that you work in one of the most in-demand fields right now because API writers are, I guess you would call them sort of like the hot thing within technical writing, and technical writers who don't have a background in API documentation, aren't doing it, are bringing it up to me and saying, hey, this is the new cool thing. And so it is spreading among technical writers. And I would imagine, you being there more early on, you have a good understanding of where the industry of technical writing is going. So I'd love to hear your idea of what the future of technical writing looks like.
Yeah, just to add to that, if somebody, I don't remember if you had a question here about how somebody could get into, the API writing or platform writing, but I would recommend, if people are interested in this, to learn some programming languages. And even if they're, so for me, I mean, that was never really my interest as much as writing what the solutions are, what developers have come up with. So I would say in terms of where it's going, I'm not sure that it's all going towards API writing. There is a lot of UX writing. So there's kind of two branches in a way. Is like designers, because I've worked with in a department where the writers were in the design department, and writers can work for designers where basically they're creating the text of websites and maybe even text that is used in voice technology. And then there's API writers who are writing the documentation for all the platforms that are out there. So in terms of the API writing, I would say there's a lot more collaboration coming, I think, in terms of with engineers and with others, just so the writer becomes more of an editor, more automation, where there's just the API documentation is kind of generated from a tool and a continuous integration and continuous delivery of documentation to more readers. So, the kind of a CI/CD where that auto-generated documentation is pushed out on a regular basis as opposed to tied to releases. So one of the things that I was doing at one company was I was editing the developer portal directly. Like there wasn't kind of a publication process where every week we would wait and the writer wouldn't publish it, but we would have to, I mean, somebody else would publish it for the writer, but the writer would actually publish it. So I was able to do that.
Okay. And thank you for giving us those in-depth insights. I really appreciate it. Now, one of the things that technical writers go through when they're trying to advance their career, and let's say in a perfect scenario, they know the great industry to get into and they adopt all the right skills, but then they get into their company and they're facing hurdles, and maybe it's communication hurdles, whatever those hurdles may look like. And how do they solve them? So if you can give some examples of hurdles that technical writers may face and the solutions for them, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So With API writing, especially, I mean, there's a lot of hurdles in that. Usually you're understaffed, there's a heavy load. Um, it's not often, it's often where, a writer will be the only one doing all of the API writing for the whole company. And it's mainly because it's not really seen as, the writing is not seen as much, is as important as, all the developers creating the APIs. And even sometimes the APIs aren't seen as important as just working with specific partners and creating, those integrations. So some companies don't see a platform as being important. They basically just want to have some integrations with partners and that be it. So I think that's one of the big challenges, is just working with partners, and staffing. Ambiguity, lack of clarity, is a challenge, but generally, if you're going to be a writer, you should find that challenge as something you want to face. I often say that being a technical writer is similar to being an investigative journalist, because you have to go around and really find what it is you have to write. It's not always very clear that, at least at the higher levels, that here's what you got to write about, and here's your work, and then move on. So I like that. I like being able to, being intellectually curious, and then advocating for the customer, and then saying, okay, well, we should write about this so that people can use it. And again, that leads into just being a self-starter. So often the companies I was at, while I did work, in with a manager or a boss, for the most part, I set my own goals and worked independently, where I would work cross-functionally with many different teams, many different people, to gather the materials that I need and then publish them.
Thank you for that explanation. One of the things that I find really interesting is, when you're looking to get in technical writing, oftentimes you may have a background as a writer, and you may think like, hey, I should be a technical writer because it's a path where I can earn a higher salary. And that's a thought for a lot of writers who enter. However, technical writing is not for everyone. There's other things that go into that equation. So can you talk about some of the signs that technical writing is for you?
Some ideas that I had about why technical writing isn't for you. So I'll start with those. So basically, if you don't like to write, then it's not for you. That's the most important. If you want to use it as a stepping stone to a different position, I would just say apply for whatever position you want. I mean, you're never not experienced enough to become what you want, so especially in this world, with this, modern times now. I would say just go for what you want. Don't say, oh, I'm going to be a writer for this company, and then hop over into, QA or something, or an engineer. And finally, if you kind of need or crave validation, it you might often feel, or sometimes I've felt that, my work is never read, but then I do hear from people that say, oh yeah, this helped, and that really is great to hear. But I never expect it, because it doesn't really come there that often, where people would say that writing is great. You'll probably hear complaints that, something doesn't exist, or it's wrong. But so that's what I would say. If it's not for you, it's not for you. If those one of those areas makes sense. If is for you, I would say, again, if you kind of enjoy the curiosity of learning new things and describing it to people, if you like being able to sit and just make sense of something and put it into a document, and then sharing it out and saying, does this make sense? Does this kind of help you understand what this product does? If you like that kind of challenge, then you definitely will enjoy writing. I mean, I guess, if you're a reporter or something, you probably would enjoy it. It's a little bit more detailed. I can't really speak to that. I've never been a reporter, but I mean, I do really see it as just you are writing for an audience that is pretty small and pretty technical, at least on the API side. And if you enjoy that and just kind of love being immersed in that world, and then it's for you.
It's awesome. And appreciate you going into depth into that. Now, before we hop off, do you have any more advice for technical writers out there who are looking to break into technical writing or are currently technical writers looking to upskill and really get a either a better salary or a better position within technical writing?
Yeah, I mean, just advice for people to, breaking in, I would just say write, just write for as many products that you can out there. Just try it out. There's tons of open software products out there on GitHub. I'd say reach out to the people who have created those and say, hey, I'd like to write your README, or even just write it and send it to them saying, here, I wrote this README. What do you think? Or put it on GitHub and see if they'll take your pull request. Reach out um, to companies and do the same. I'd say also start a blog, use it to describe new technologies to different audiences. Write, like for example, a post for highly technical people, and then write the same post for people who aren't technical at all to kind of get that muscle going. Answer questions on Stack Overflow or Quora. Basically, get used to communicating through writing and just get your work out there. For people who are looking to advance, like maybe if you are a technical writer currently, and either you want to move into API writing or just grow, I would say just the traditional ways, just basically express that to the people around you. Be vocal, be present, and really start diving into how can you help others around you to improve what it is that they're doing, either by maybe giving a course on writing to others. I think what it is like, don't ever see it as too precious, like, oh, if other people write, then maybe they won't need me. I think it's more just an idea of train the trainers and or to be a teacher, and I found that, for example, at one job, there were a lot of engineers, a couple of engineers who wanted to write, and so I basically helped them by giving them the style guide and giving them guidance on how the company wanted the content written, and then they would do that and send it to me for editing, and then we got it out there. So that's the goal, is just bring everybody in and be somebody who people go to for that as a resource for writing.
I think that's such a great point to leave off on, is ultimately you are trying to become a resource within the company, and how do you best do that? So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you got a lot from it. I sure got a lot from it. And if people want to reach out to you, are they able to do that? Can they reach out to you through like LinkedIn, wherever it may be?
Yeah, sure. I am on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach me. And I guess you could put it wherever you need. It's Yves Grant at LinkedIn.
And if you're watching this video, the link to his LinkedIn profile will probably be in the description below. I can't guarantee it, but it will probably be there. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll go from here.